Hello and welcome to the A-rated Rogan series, where we upgrade this poster child for the sick building syndrome to be an A-rated family home. In today's episode, we look at upgrading the ventilation from its old passive to a fully mechanical heat recovery ventilation system. Let's get into it. So, a normal milestone on the thought process of doing an energy efficiency upgrade for your house is to contemplate how you're going to achieve ventilation in the house. So, obviously we need fresh air to breathe, inhale oxygen, exhale CO2, all that type of stuff. You need to exchange air within the house, otherwise the humidity that your body gives off will cause dampness, mold, health problems down the road. The structure, might fail if it gets too damp. It's very important to keep an eye on ventilation. But ventilation has the possibility, if done badly, to waste heat a lot. So there are a couple of different ways to address ventilation. So in Ireland, for example, under Building Regs Part F, it's got a couple of helpful diagrams to go over the kind of basic concepts of ventilation. So what typically happens in an Irish home is, as you can see here in diagram 2C, you have cross ventilation, which is where you have ventilators, which are just, for all intents and purposes, holes in the wall or holes in the window of an engineered size. And the idea is air just blows in and out. So this is called natural ventilation, it's called passive ventilation, and it's very simple to achieve and it's effective, albeit it has its drawbacks. You waste heat a lot because you've no huge control over what goes in and out. And in some cases it's inadequate ventilation because users end up taping over joints and it doesn't work out well. You can kind of see two extracts indicated here, and these would be called intermittent extracts. So you've got an intermittent extract over the shower. So the idea is how the home user would switch on a fan, maybe switch on a light switch. That's how they get it going, or it switches on by itself when there's a lot of steam generation going on. And similarly, you can see over the cooker here that there's intermittent mechanical extract ventilation there, so a cooker hood. But again, users having to remember to do these things doesn't always happen. So this is the baseline. You can step up to fancier systems, and a very good one that I have used in the past for 10 years, it's a French system by a crowd called Air Eco, and in our last house, and it's called a demand control ventilation, or in this case they call it continuous mechanical extract ventilation. And the idea is still have the same opes in the walls in the habitated rooms, but what you do in lieu is in the steam or cooking odor generating rooms, you put ducts that go to a place, usually in the attic or central area, where you have a fan that runs constantly. And the advantage of this system is you're going to get good ventilation regardless of whether there's a gale force wind or there's no wind outside blowing air through the house. And you can start putting smarts into the air inlets into the habitated rooms, like the sitting room or the bedroom. You can, for example, the Air ecosystem that I used in the past, it had a humidity sensitive nylon string basically that opened and closed little veins to let air in, more air out, so that it would increase ventilation effectively when there's high humidity inside. So you can do little smart things like that. But I want to do something a little bit smarter. And for that, I want to look at mechanical heat recovery ventilation system. And the idea of this, and it's quite similar to what you'd see in a lot of North American homes, is where you have internal ducting, not just for the extract, but also for the supply into the space. And how that is useful to you, apart from assuring that you are absolutely going to get the right amount of air in and out in each space, so-called balanced system. What you can also do is, when you're sucking the air out of the space, you can try to recover some of the heat from that air and pass that heat to the incoming airstream. So that's where the heat recovery ventilation bit comes in. And that's what I want to look at. And there's a nice little image I just found here on one of the websites of showing what the mechanical heat recovery ventilator works like. And this is the heat exchanger here. And you can kind of see we have the stale air, and yeah, I think the colors here aren't great, but the stale air from inside comes into the unit. It's getting sucked into the unit by a fan. It's passing over a filter because you want to make sure that you keep your heat exchanger clean. It's giving up its heat. It's heating up this heat exchanger, which is, for all intents and purposes, just a big lump of metal with slots drilled into it that air can pass through. The air is vented to the outside, so it's just dumped outside. Simultaneously, there's a second fan and a second filter, which is pulling air from outside, passing it through a filter, so you can filter out particulates and dust and things like that from the street. And it's passing over the same lump of metal that has been heated up by the extraction. So you're kind of transferring the heat from what was sucked out of the house is now being used to heat up the air going into the house. Now, it's never 100% efficient, but some of them claim 90% odd efficiency, which is good enough for government work. And then it just blows the air into the house, into the habitated rooms. So for example, you blow it into your bedrooms, your sitting rooms, places like that. So that's the system I want to pursue. So let's have a look at just what other parameters are necessary when doing that. Let's do a design on my house and we'll talk about things as they pop up. Okay, so let's design my heat recovery ventilation system. And before we go too deep into this is what I did, I can highly recommend, I'll put a link in the description below, this video by Peter Warm, and it's a couple of years old, but you can see that the chap is obviously a long-time designer and he's sharing his knowledge with a group of people, and he's got some very good tips and tricks towards the end. Now, I haven't been able to meet all of his aspirations, but at least I had a couple of good nuggets of information going in. So link in the description. So I think the easiest way to start off is to look at the floor plan. And on the left, we've got ground floor, first floor, and the attic space here. And in the first instance, you want to figure out where your air is going in and where your air is going out. So plus indicates positive pressure and it's warm, you know, heat recovery ventilation, and negative indicates negative pressure, it's getting sucked out. So you want to put your negative ventilation in the WC shower room, understairs WC, the kitchen space, the bathroom, anywhere where there's an odor or steam getting generated. You want to suck that away. You don't want that seeping around the rest of the house. And conversely, in spaces where one sits or sleeps or whatever, that's where you want to inject the fresh air, the heated air. So you can see we've got it in the bedroom study on the side extension there, the sitting room, the bedrooms, and in the little wardrobe space. And there's a reason why I have to do that. If you tot up, you'll see that roughly speaking, the quantity of inlets and outlets, roughly speaking, matches up. And that's deliberate. You want to have a balanced system, generally speaking. You want to have as much air going into the house as is being taken out. You don't want to end up in a situation where you're running the house at a negative pressure, and similarly, you don't want the space over-pressurized. In most cases, you want balanced air. And I'm showing it going into a wardrobe there. It's not really a place where someone sits, but I figure I needed to achieve balanced air, and what better way to make use of some heated air than to ventilate out potentially damp jackets. We'll see if the idea works out, if I'm not wedded to the idea. Okay, so that's where the air inlets and outlet ventilation. And by the way, this type of a design, any reputable vendor of heat recovery ventilation will do it for you. The next thing you need to consider is, obviously, doors can be closed. So you'll see that I have indicated where we want undercuts. So this is where the bottom of the door is sliced off and it lets air travel underneath it. So in the shower rooms, WCs, bathrooms, things like that, there's no problem to have an undercut there, and it just lets the air route in even if the door is physically closed. Otherwise, you would be forced to kind of keep your doors open to maintain airflow. You'll notice I haven't done it in the bedrooms. I am permitting, if people want to close their doors, They can close their doors. There's no loss of privacy or anything like that. But in practical terms, we usually leave the doors open ajar anyway, so air moves. So you have the choice. The next thing you need to contemplate is where are you going to site your heat recovery ventilation unit. So it's going to be a big bulky unit, maybe, I don't know, 800 mil wide by, I guess, a metre high by a couple of 100 mil deep, depending on the unit you need, the size you need, things like that. In my case, and it's not an ideal situation, I'm fully aware of that, but I've sited it in the attic. Typically you want to put it in a conditioned space, as in a room temperature space, so that you're not leaking heat. I've taken measures to kind of mitigate the impact of not being in a fully heated space. I am aware that down the road I'm going to be externally insulating the wall that this thing is mounted on, and we're probably going to do an attic conversion in time, so this situation will improve in time. You notice as well I'm showing the inlets and outlets for the ventilation on that side facade. It is important that the inlet and the outlet are on the same facade. The reason being, you don't want to have positive pressure, if there's a gale force wind outside, and then you'll have a load of negative pressure on the other side. You're moving on. The other reason why I have it in the attic in that particular location is bearing in mind the construction of our house. We have to get ducts. So in my case, I'm going to be using either 1 or 2 number 75 mil circular ducts. You'll see an image of it in a moment, going to each of either the air inlet or air outlet. I know I'm doing construction in the shower room, and I know that I can use that as a riser space to get down to the basement, or to the ground floor, and then distribute everywhere else in that side extension, and also loop back into the sitting room. So it is, while you don't get bound up in choosing the locations of your air inlets and outlets based on how you get ducts to them, it is an important consideration. And you also want to minimize the length of your ducts, just get rid of some losses. And then that's pretty much it. The final thing is there will be different modes of operation. So there's normal trickle ventilation, which you use all the time, background ventilation, but there's also going to be cases when you want increased ventilation. So without lowering the tone, when someone uses a loo, odors are produced, you typically want greater ventilation at those times. So one way of doing it is to put a little boost button, which someone can just click on, and it'll run the heat recovery ventilation a bit harder for 10-15 minutes, similar to people that have normal extract ventilators in their bathrooms. In my case, I want to go with a hands-off solution. I want to go with PIRs, so presence infrared sensors that detect when someone's there and boost. And also, you'll notice I've got HMI there in the hallway, so I want the control panel to be remotely located away from the heat recovery ventilation unit. I want it down somewhere where I can see what it's doing, and it can, if a filter needs changing or whatever, I can see the panel and it'll tell me about it. So that's the rough layout of what I've chosen. Like, other tips and tricks is you want to go for cross ventilation, so as much across the room as possible. So you'll see that in the case of the bedrooms, that the air inlets are in the very far corners away from where the doors are. So you kind of have to bear in mind your placement of your air ducts or your air terminals, just to make sure that you're not creating an inadvertent draft. So that's roughly speaking the layout of what we're going to do. Let's now look at how we size the unit and choose it, and the little bits and bobs we get with it. Again, in Building Regs Part F, they have some good guidance as to how to choose the size of the unit and how much air volume it should move. And they calculate it one way or another way. So the first way is you want 5 litres per second, just standard, plus 4 litres per second per person. So that's basically 6 number of people. So take that as kind of the quantity of people, multiply that by 4 litres per second, and you come up with 24, plus 5 litres per second, I can only presume is for the cat. So 29 litres per second based on the occupancy of the dwelling. Okay, but then what the building regs tell you to do is to calculate it in a different way and then take a worst case scenario. So we've got 29 calculated one way. Let's copy that. Okay, the house is basically finished floor area 122 square meters by 0.3 litres per second per square meter. So that comes up to 36. So that's obviously the worst case scenario. So let's take that as our working number, and we need to achieve basically 36.6 litres per second. They then want you to get a general continuous extract ventilation, and they want you to scale that up by 25%, basically to allow for boosting at different places. So 36.6 multiplied by 1.25 to add on 25%, that's basically coming up to 46% litres per second. So that's roughly speaking the number we need to hit. There is further guidance down below for when one is commissioning the system to what proportion litres per second should go through each room. But for now, let's not worry about that. We just need to choose the overall unit itself. When buying the unit, I went to 2 or 3 vendors around Ireland. There was an Irish company and they sell an Irish made one. They came back with a silly money, I think €6,000 or something like that for a system, so forget about that. I found a very good company in Northern Ireland and they do these kits. And the idea of the kit is you buy your heat recovery ventilation unit. It gives you quantity of ducting, and in this case I went for this radial ducting, 75 mil, and it's actually pretty cool. So it's continuous, there are no joints, so less chance of leakage from the ductwork. It's 75 mil, so it's quite small, so you can accommodate it quite easily in spaces. You can double it up if you have a high ventilation space. Take, for example, a bedroom with 2 people, you end up having 2 ducts worked into that, whereas a single occupancy bedroom is 1 duct. It gives you all of the fixed PVC ductwork for your inlet and outlet from the ventilation unit. It gives you all of your supply and extract terminals, or as they call them here, quality extract and supply valves. So these are the things you physically see on your ceiling. It gives you the external cowl. Sometimes people call that the bull nose. It gives you your distribution box. Your distribution box is actually pretty important because that is how you stop sound transfer from one room to another by using things like that. And all the various different bits and bobs you need, and tape and stuff for holding fences together. It's very useful for routing ductwork. But either way, I got a very nice kit, and I have a feeling I paid 2.6 a few months ago for this. I can see it's 2.9. I presume inflation has hit, but it gives you all you need. And funny enough, my install didn't look a million miles different to what they've got in their little graphic. So highly recommend looking into buying a kit which gives you a lot of stuff to get you going. And in particular, I can say, with experience, these BPC ventilation, not sponsored, no reduced rates or anything like that, I found them quite easy to deal with on the phone. You saw my little design I had here. They did their own design based off that, and in fact tweaked 1 or 2 details that I had shown because I hadn't balanced it correctly. I found them very good to deal with, so would recommend. So that is the overall kit. As to the particular heat recovery ventilation unit itself, there were 2 features I wanted in it that don't come in every heat recovery ventilation system. The first one is something that occurs during summer. So remember, these units are optimized for cold environments where you want to recover every bit of heat that you're sucking from the exhaust to make sure that you pass that heat to the air coming into the space. Now, if you're going for, as I am, a very highly efficient, thermally efficient building, what I don't want is to have a super overheated house and then a heat recovery ventilation system doing its utmost to overheat that house. So there is a feature whereby there's a little valve, damper actuator, that opens and closes so that the extract air, when it comes from the house and it's heated, it doesn't go through the heat exchanger to heat up the intake air. It in fact bypasses and dumps straight outside. So that was definitely one feature I wanted, and I wanted to be transparent. I didn't want to have to go up and rebalance valves myself. The other thing I wanted, and I have a daughter who is asthmatic, and it's funny just watching her walking the street when she comes home from school in winter, that there's one particular house that burns coal or timber or whatever the hell they burn, and it's just always there that she starts coughing. So I wanted, as best as possible, keep the air quality in the space up to give us as good a chance as possible. So all heat recovery ventilation units basically come with some class of filtration, but I wanted to get one with the finest filter possible in a domestic unit. And sure enough, there is one so typical ones are kind of down around these filter classes. You can kind of see the particle sizes and typical applications. So final filters for air conditioning, sales rooms, department stores, offices. And then you can get up to this F7 grade, which is to more dust sensitive areas. So I did in fact find a heat recovery unit that could take these much finer F7 filters. So that's what led me to the Ventaxia low carbon Sentinel Kinetic Advance. Again, not sponsored, none of that jazz, but they do have the concept of a full summer bypass, and they describe here ISO, E, PM, particulate matter 10 and E particulate matter 2.5 filter options. It's basically the grade of the filter is F7. So then the only thing is to choose the right size. So bear in mind, we figure we have in and around a 45, 46 litres per second requirement. So here is the Ventaxia catalogue, and the smallest size, because you never want to oversize your plant, the smallest size is, and it comes in around 68 litres a second from what I can ascertain at 100 pascals. So that's, it's a bit more than I need, but it has a VSD, it ramps down. I'm fine with that. So that's the unit I wanted. I was able to buy it from BPC in Northern Ireland, and basically happy days. And the only thing to kind of add was I wanted to do presence sensors in the bathrooms, the odor generating spaces. And I just bought simple PIR sensors. So these are intended for lighting, but there's no reason why you can't just adjust the lux level so that it'll come on even if it's daytime, and then you set your timeout here. So ramp for 15 minutes. So I just bought these simple IP65 rated ones so I could use them in shower rooms as well, basically. Let us have a look at the actual kit itself. we are ready for a smoke test. Let's see what happens. That was a very ominous noise. I wonder, is there something I have to remove? Okay, language, English. Okay, country, Ireland. We'll skip loading the settings. Unit configuration. Yes, we are on the left-hand configuration. I changed that. Filter check every 12 months. Service interval every 60 months. We'll take that. Mode names, we'll leave them as they are. We haven't wired in our boost switches yet, so we'll leave them alone. User mode, normal, low, boost, purge. We'll leave that as is, because we need the upstairs. Summer bypass, we'll leave that as is. Internal RH trip. So this is if someone's using a shower. Okay. Frost protection, airflow. Don't know what that means. Leave mode scheduling alone. Leave silent hours alone. Oh no, it's service phone. I'm not going to fill in the phone number. Not going to lock a code. Modify settings. Exit. And that's it. We seem to be live. I can hear it buzzing away there, alright. Quite silent, I must say. Okay. Let's see if we can see any info on the temperatures. These are various speeds. It's pulling in 9.5 Celsius. It's extracting 13.8. Interesting. Now, while I do have the ductwork mostly run on insulation, isn't all run on insulation. We'll see now as the unit sucks in air if it heats up. Wouldn't surprise me. 13.9 is the temperature in the attic that this unit has been sitting in, and it's just coming up to temp. And the extract RH is 75. I think we have to leave that settle for a while. You can see the extract temp is coming up. So that's very good. I think we'll leave this for a while and see how we get on. Okay, so let's do the BER DEAP analysis to see what kind of numbers we get to improve on our BER rating. So I don't think there's anything really to do in floors, roofs, walls, any of this jazz. It is roughly speaking as it is. There is a whole ventilation setting here, and there's one or two things we have to do here. So in the first instance, we're going to get rid of the bathroom intermittent fan. That is deleted. And with the chimney, I unfortunately, even though I have fitted one of those balloons to it to block it off from a ventilation perspective, I do have to leave it listed here because the chimney needs to be permanently out of service, i.e. by blocking it up, and kind of the DEAP manual will give you that advice. So I have to leave that there for now. And in terms of the non-closable vents, so these are the passive ones, I can in fact delete that. Happy days. So we can get rid of that. And you can see the numbers are improving as we go along here. Now we are going to add something that does consume energy, there's no doubt about it, but ventilation first and foremost is about keeping a fresh environment, and second of all, not wasting energy while doing so. So there will be some sort of an impact here, there's no doubt about it. So moving on, oh yeah, and sorry, we are leaving a draft lobby in the main entrance. Just in general, those things are pretty smart to put into any new design. So structural air tightness, the fact of the matter is, I and I touched on this in the previous video, we by rights, when you're fitting heat recovery ventilation, you should have it as sealed as possible a house. It's not going to be possible to get this to modern building regs standard sealing. It's just simply not going to happen, but we will go as far as we can. So like blocking up the chimney, as I was referring to, we've blocked up all of the old vents with expanding foam. And anytime I come across some oddball opening where cables might have gone through in the past or something like that, I block it up so that the only way of air getting in and out is, you know, proper engineered opes. Also, with the window choice you might have seen in one of the previous videos, we deliberately chose to not have openable windows in certain cases to avoid air passing through. And then we're going to put in ventilation method here. So you see I've already, so this is what we would be if we were on natural ventilation. So 276, but if I put in balanced heat recovery with heat recovery, it increases energy consumption, but what we do have to fill in is our specific fan power in watts per litre per second and our heat exchanger efficiency. And these are extremely conservative energy inefficient values. We can do far better than this. So if you look at the low Ventaxia Sentinel Kinetic Advance, in the UK, they're very good for recording these details. Okay, in Ireland anyway, we have this thing called the HARP database, which is basically a database of technical equipment you can buy for houses, and it gives in a standardized format test data that manufacturers have to submit. But unfortunately, the Irish one, it doesn't include heat recovery ventilation systems, whereas the UK one does. And this is the standardized format for the air heat recovery ventilation system we have, and it gives different numbers, but K plus N refers to quantity of wet rooms. I presume there's something about having steam laden air or having high humidity air affects efficiency. So we have 3 wet rooms. So we have a main family bathroom, a separate little weird shower room that we've kept, and in the side extension there will be a shower / WC. So we'll go with N is equal to 3, and there are different test methodologies over the years. I think we'll use the most conservative number, which suggests that per litre per second our unit will consume 0.55 watts, and the efficiency of the heat exchanger will be 91%. So let's put that into the app and see what it does. 0.55 and then 91, and see if that improves our numbers. It does, it improves them a bit. And then we've got might as well put this in here, Ventaxia Sentinel Kinetic Advance F. How many wet rooms? Excuse me, including the kitchen. So it classifies the kitchen as a wet room, in which case we ought to go with 4. N is equal to 4, so that means we have 0.7 and 91%. 0.7, and we leave our heat exchanger efficiency there. So 4, and our ventilation ducting, the ones internal to the building basically, which is the ones we truly care about, is flexible. And external uninsulated ducting. I'm just curious what difference that makes. Minor, but it does make some difference. So that is roughly speaking it. I don't think there's any other settings we need to change here. Yeah, so it has improved from an E to a D by doing this intervention. So happy days. So what's it been like living with the heat recovery ventilation system? We've had it operational for about 6 months now. So we fitted it, I think, October 22. It's now April 23. So we've had it throughout the winter, and it's been quite effective. I've had to tune the airflow rates because we're only ventilating the top half of the house at the moment, plus the kitchen. We're running kind of unbalanced at the moment. At the present moment, we're gearing up to renovate our side extension, so we don't have a lot of the air inlets, air outlets fully configured yet. It's been quite good. We did upgrade the ventilation. It comes supplied with a somewhat coarse filter, so we went for the proper F7 filter after the coarse filter did fill up. Not due to construction works, just due to standard road traffic basically, and people burning sooty fuel near us. Yeah, it has been pretty good. We haven't felt uncomfortable in the house. There's been no kind of sense of drafts. The noise of air movement when the thing ramps can be noticeable. It's not intrusive, but it is noticeable. But overall, I'm quite satisfied with it. And yeah, I would definitely recommend it in a retrofit situation even. Just think about your duct routes and where you can hide things in the back of wardrobes, or like I had the great opportunity to hide most of the downstairs ducts in behind a false wall, and that was just absolutely gift to be able to do that. And yeah, the insulation to the unit and the ductwork in the attic I found a bit tricky, and I'd like to go back and hit it again. But apart from that, I'm pretty satisfied with it. So thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to putting out the next video on bathroom renovation. Goodbye.